Hey folks, me, Casual Tycoon. We're back with part 2 of my Dragon Coaster build. If you were here last week, you saw we built the Dragon Coaster for Iron Matty's Dragon Coaster competition. It's got a lot of sweeping turns, not a whole lot of big drops, but it's part of a unofficial mini build along with the Rising Raptor flat ride that I've got over on the left side of the screen. You'll see it soon enough. Last week we created the coaster, we made the station, we did the little plaza, and it looked pretty good. The whole story was that someone lives here in this weird log cabin, and they have a fiery contraption, and that contraption is the Dragon Coaster. Now, the log cabin, of course, wouldn't be complete without a forest. So here you can see me placing down a whole lot of foliage. Eventually some pine trees, some ash trees, some oak trees, and a bunch of bushes. I also thought it'd be kind of neat if we had kind of one of those steam coal machine crane looking things in that blue that I've been using throughout the build, including in the flat rate build. And that kind of hints at maybe this person here is a little industrial, right? Maybe they build things, including this fiery contraption, of course. With all the building of the the foliage that we've added here, I think it's starting to kind of create a nice atmosphere for the ride. You see we put a little bit of fire here, which is kind of fun. I'll go ahead and trigger that later, not right now. But what I like to do while I'm building is go ahead and walk through or kind of ride through the ride, make sure there's no clipping, but also that there's that sense that you're flying through the trees. Because there's not a whole lot of drops, it doesn't go that fast, but the kind of close proximity of the trees is really nice. The next thing I wanted to do was kind of build a evac system, a staircase, if you will, off the mid-course brake run, which you can see is pretty much right on top of the final brake run. Now, you might notice this is way out of the build area, which is on the left, noted with the little chain link fencing. I, however, did not notice that until much later. So you're going to watch me build the whole thing. I'll put some railings in, I'll go ahead and clean up the colors, and then we'll get into what it looks like when I realize my mistake. The whole idea here was that if folks were on the mid-course brake run and they needed to get off, they could just walk down these stairs with the help of a fictional employee, and they'd end up in the maintenance area of the flat ride. Right off to the right, you can see the kind of backstage area, and I thought it created kind of a cohesive feel, a feeling of, there's a singular backstage to these two builds. That, of course, didn't work out, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you think about it. Coming off an evac, I've never been evac, maybe you have. I don't think that you necessarily go off in a completely different direction. It would make a little bit more sense if we can get you kind of back into the regular ride area. So I went ahead and moved those trees so that I can make space for these the stairwell. Now the stairwell uses these metal walkway pieces, as you know from part 1 of the build, that this is a no TMTK build. And so I try to make this work as best as possible. One of the big issues that I had, though, was that my recording kind of fudged. And what I ended up doing is deleting a bunch of recording and ended up with this lovely wooden staircase. You can see I'm using a lot of those thick wooden beams, some wooden railings. I try to add a little accent to where the railings are. Not sure if that ever sticks around. But you can see there, I actually even created the individual stairs with some planks. And I thought that turned out real nice. Now, with this build, I wanted it to feel a little bit like Fire Chaser Express. I think that's what it's called over in Dollywood. So I went on everyone's favorite website, RCDB, and took a look at them, and they're just metal stairs. So that wasn't really useful. That didn't necessarily work for me. But I did notice that the kind of proportions of them were kind of like long. They're very tall. They're very sparse, of course, because they're made of metal. They're very utilitarian, but they did blend into the overall kind of hillside that they're kind of placed in. And so what you'll see a little later is that we'll add a bunch of trees and bushes to kind of hide these. Now, what's really nice about building these pieces as kind of, you can imagine landing stair, is that I could split them apart so that they're not part of one big building and then copy them over. And even though they don't line up perfectly the first time I do this, they line up pretty well, and it actually looks, I feel, a lot better than the metal stairways. If you agree, go ahead and leave a comment and say, hey, those look pretty good. If you think that they don't look that great, that's okay, because we're going to go ahead and change them pretty soon. The thick wooden beams that I'm using, I'm not a huge fan of, at least for the vertical support structure. And so we'll go ahead and change those. But before I do that, we're going to add a bunch of trim, clean it up. I didn't mention it already, but I'm using this kind of wooden, I think they're not balcony pieces, I think they're like platform pieces for the actual walkway part, and I think that works really nicely. They come in squares and rectangles, and so they're adaptable to both the walkway right when you get off the coaster, but also the landing of the staircase. You can see here they fit together real nice. Now, one of the things I like to do when I'm building is kind of take a step back and look at it from ground level, from peep level. I don't go into TEDGCAD mode, but you saw I went, pretty much to the ground level. And that allows me to kind of see, is this scaling right? Does it look like it fits? Does it look like it can be built? Because, you can always have floating objects in plan code. We like to avoid that, of course, as much as possible, but it also should look, like I said in part 1, realistic light. It could be done, maybe with a few extra pieces here and there, but it looks like, someone somewhere put some thought into effort into making this thing stand up in some way. And so as a result, I took away a lot of those big, thick wooden beams. I recolored them into our kind of blue aqua teal color that we're using not only in the coaster track but also on the Rising Raptor back there. And I replaced those vertical wooden beams with these kind of smaller wooden pillars, and I think it works out really well. It has also a nice little foot, a nice little base, a wooden base, which I think makes it also look more grounded in the space. Granted, in just a little bit, we're going to cover these up with some trees. Again, this should look like a forest, but we'll see how that turns out. I hope you all agree. Now, the proportions were still a little off, so I worked with a few kind of smaller wooden pieces to see if I can add some details, some accents that kind of made a little bit more sense. This kind of cross-bracing thing looked cool, looked like it could work, but I scrapped it. Looked like a little bit too much work, and it looked like a little bit too much detail for what this was. So I went ahead and just put these little horizontal beams, and I think they work out well. They add just a little bit of detail to make it seem like someone could actually stop in the mid-course brake run and just walk their way down. Here we go ahead and add back some of those trees, but instead of using oak, we're using some pine trees. The oaks were actually just going to drop right into the ground, and they create like a lovely kind of undergrowth, a bunch of bushes, and I think that worked out really well. It fills in the space nicely. Now, I noticed from the last build, I didn't use the same pathing, so I went ahead and fixed that and kind of made the front plaza a little smaller. I didn't want it to take up too much space, and I also wanted the trees to really fill up that first entrance area, so it's kind of a big reveal. First, you see the coaster when you're walking through the trees, and then you see the kind of log cabin steam crane machine. Now, throughout the build area, I use forest bushes, some of those large green bushes, but noticing where there's a few pockets of sunlight, I go ahead and add some kind of wildflowers just in the typical Planco default yellow. I could always go back and change those. We'll see if we do that. I'm not 100% sure. I also like using those desert bushes. They add a little bit of color and texture, although they don't totally make a whole lot of sense. After using them, I took a look on Wikipedia, and they definitely don't make sense, and they wouldn't necessarily be in a pine forest. But that's okay, because at the peep level, they look great. They add some accent color, and these little rocks add a little bit of accent color and texture as well. They also help create, as I said in part 1, a whole lot of depth, and that depth helps, sell the scene that this is a kind of deep wooded forest where Sammy has created this weird dragon fiery dragon contraption. Now, realizing that the mid-course break run evac stairs are in the build area, that's good. They needed to go somewhere. With all those trees in the way, we couldn't necessarily have folks just walk right through the trees, and I really wanted to create that kind of wooded feel. So instead what I did was build out, using the same kind of pieces and language, the final break run that also leads into the station. And I use the same pieces. You can see we use some of those balcony or platform pieces, some of the thick wooden beams for trim, and then we'll use some of those wood railings. Eventually I'll connect the two and you'll see pretty soon, and that's real fun. But in the meantime, I need to clear up this corner. So I use some regular planks. And then the smallest pieces I could find, which I know I've seen plenty of folks on YouTube use this, are these little brackets. They don't look great in terms of the way I use them, I think, because they can use a slightly different color. But we'll say it helps sell the scene, sell the story of kind of a haphazard created log cabin setting fire dragon thing. If you believe it, that's all that counts. Now, with the railings put into place, I'm going to go ahead and connect the mid-course break run evac stairs to here, so it'll be a nice big piece. And in next week's video, we're going to see how this all connects to the maintenance shed. Now, once you're off those mid-course stairs, all you got to do is take a little drop off this oddly placed and not perfectly aligned step and make a right, and then you're right there. You're right back in the station, so I think that works. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like, leave a comment if you want me to hear from you, and be sure to subscribe if you're interested in seeing how this build goes. I'll leave you here with a few cinematics of how it's coming out. Thanks, folks.